I'm here, as you heard, to talk about my new portraits, and this talk was very long when I made it, and it's still a little longer than it's supposed to be, but you'll forgive me for that. And in the process, you might learn less about me than you hope to, which is great for me. And so that's the explanation there. Apologies for that. This is an example of the new portraits that I'm making and that I'm here to talk about, and it's a self-portrait. I made it at the end of last year, and if I can make my way through, then I'll explain to you why I think it's a portrait, why I think it's a good portrait, and why and how I hope to make more of these portraits. These are the old portraits, which I still enjoy taking very much, but they tend generally to be close-cropped, evenly lit, and not unlike a passport photo or a mugshot or something like that. And the reason that it's sparse and economical in its treatment is that what I'm trying to do is reduce the distance between a viewer and the subject. I want to kick out everything that might be in the way of you understanding who these people are. And so that, in a shoot, will take the place of sort of facial gymnastics to get them not only to not smile, but to not have them slack and just engage their face just enough so that we might get a peek into who it is that they are and what their real identity is. And so I feel I've gotten better at it, and it's been very rewarding to feel that way. But I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for this gimmick that I tripped over, which is this self-effacing way of me describing this technique that I came up with that nobody had done before, this little sliver of it. And that is, as mentioned, it's that I reconstitute my portraits that I shoot in a mosaic format of push pins. This is a detail of one. Backed up further on the same one, this is your old mayor, for those of you who live here, Daigh, and it was a great honor to shoot him, by the way. If we compare the two images, what I think is the interesting aspect, what I get off on in making these, is that on the left we have as close as I could get to the truth of who he was and what he was on that day, which, for trivia, it was about 3 weeks prior to his departure. And on the right you have what happens when the image is forced to do without all of the legs that one would typically stand on, which would be your resolution and color and all the subtle gradation that takes place there. If we force something, an image, to be less and to have to do more with less, in this case the three primary colors in black and white, and then make them out of this crude sort of artless material, then what happens and what do we learn about ourselves in the sparsity of that effort? And when an image is right on the edge of not being able to convey what that subject is or who that subject is, but then still does, that's my sweet spot. That's exactly what I'm after and where I'm trying to exist. This is my Midwest gallery. This is Carl Hammer Gallery here in the city. This is my wife. We're going to skate through these. This is my son. This is a guy named Lance. This is another of my dealers named Deborah. This is Brad. Some of you know Brad. We're all sort of here because of him. Not sort of. We're all here because of Brad. This is one of the few exceptions to the pictures of a human face rule, and a very important one for me because it really was the first piece that I made that strayed from that path, which I thought was a real sellout moment, but turned out to interest me more than I expected. That was at last year's Armory show. This is a piece that, if you read Fast Company magazine, this month's issue contains a picture of this piece. They hired me to make this, of Ben Silberman, who's the Pinterest guy. Or at Expo Chicago. It was there a couple of weeks ago. This is another piece of the mayor done with spray paint and stencils, different technique, and my son rendered in the same fashion. So if I say that I care about portraiture, if that's not already clear, then you'll have to take me at my word that that's the case. I care about shooting and conveying people's portraits. This is a really big one, almost the largest I've ever done, that I just made, which I almost left out, but that's not true. I wasn't going to leave it out. I'm really proud of this one. And I think it turned out really well. All the texture is great. Visually, I really just love the thing. But it also occurred to me that the identity of this is one woman shot through the course of an 8-hour day, and then I sort of put it together like a paper doll again to show these 6 different versions of who she could be if she wanted to be. And then begins this period while I'm making that thing, which was about a year, where my psyche sort of dived, and this whole thing it wasn't enough for me, and all the questions started creeping into my head, and I started to develop opinions about people I was working with and working for. Not all the people, but lots of people, and that led to feelings that I had about myself and the way that I was behaving. And it was really disheartening. It was really rough and continues to be, but it's also fun to, I don't know, to watch myself thinking about myself that way and wonder what I think I'm doing. There were these self-prescribed methods that I was like, this is how you'll get out of it. You'll do this, and then everything will be all right. And then, so I chased those things. Oh, and in this presentation that's had to be shortened, there was going to be this really clever passage where I display what a portrait is, and then I go in to show you how I'm going to crack that open and dent it, and they're going to have to redefine what portraiture is, and it's going to be this major thing. But there isn't time, so again, apologies. And so in that time, when I was having this dark time, when I'm sitting there beating myself up and feeling bad about the work that I'm making, I started to play with a piece of software that I used to use in my previous career, which is called Cinema, and it's a 3D program, not unlike what they used to make like Pixar movies and things like that. And this software had recently added the ability to do dynamics, which in a nutshell is the ability to take the objects that you create and let them behave in a physics real manner. So things can now bounce off one another and they can fall. Gravity makes sense, friction can be twisted, and the bounce can be twisted, all these things. And I started playing with that, and it was really great. It was a really great breath of fresh air from the work that I had been doing. And I made a replica of my living room and just started what was just fun and an experiment at first, but became essentially just a habit, what was setting things up and just letting them fall down. And there was something really cathartic about, if I didn't have that many basketballs, it would be no problem. I could still get them all in there and make them all fall down, and I could see all these sort of entropic moments take place, and they could be these sort of violent acts that I didn't have to clean up, and I didn't have to listen to the noise of, and I didn't have to break my living room to see and to engage in. And it was totally intoxicating, and I started to do these things, and I started to feel that they were representing me. It was like there was this thing where something amazing was supposed to happen, but instead everything fell off to the side, and nothing really of interest did happen. And that in and of itself was interesting to me, and it felt sort of like a mirror, if I can use such a pretentious, douchey term like that, I started to feel that this thing was resonating with me in a way that I hadn't really expected. And so that's how Stomach was born. And Stomach is a project that I named for a really good reason that I'll never tell anybody, but it's a survey that you take on my website, and it's 20 questions, but I expect that to expand and contract. And they're personality questions like, how many living parents do you have? Faith or science? How many orgasms do you expect to have in the next month? Do you drink every day? And my contention is, the experiment, where these two things were headed toward converging, is that the portraits that I had already been taking, all these subjects, they had answers. There were finite answers to these questions, I was sure of it. And moreover, what was interesting is that those answers were manifest in their portraits. We could see them in there. There certainly was that content in their face, but you couldn't really say where it came from or where it was being veiled or where it was being exposed, but it was naked and hidden at the same time. And I thought that was really interesting to take and do it in a different way. What if we could take and look at all those things, but sort of quantify them more and do it with a personality test? And so back to the self-portrait. So that's what I did, is I set out to make this thing that did feel like a mirror, and that I felt to some extent contained the answers to all these questions that I might be asking somebody, and was me. Not just a picture that I liked, or not just something that was reflective of my taste, but something that actually was supposed to be me on screen. And that's where the self-portrait came in. This is what it looks like in its workshop. So if you're in the software, this gives a better sense of how every single metric of every single object, including does it exist or not, and how many are there, is all up for grabs and tweakable by a computer, just the same way you're used to sliding a slider back and forth. And that was really an awesome set of tools that I had in front of me. Too awesome, really. It proves the omnivore's dilemma. I can really do anything. So what to do first? How do you begin? So the metrics of all these objects that'll be in this case, a room, are controlled here, and they can be driven by, if I want to determine how alone does somebody feel, I can't really ask you, do you feel alone? I'm not going to get an honest answer or a useful one as far as I'm concerned, but I can ask you things like, how many people do you feel you can depend on? How many of your parents are still living? Have you ever watched a pet die? If you know somebody on a long enough timeline, do you feel you're more likely to love them or likely to hate them? And I can take all those, and they can become an amalgamated number that is how alone I believe you are. And then I can take that number and combine that with other numbers, and that can end up driving where the sun sits in the sky in the image, or how many blocks are in the room, or how many windows they are, and how large they are, how low the ceiling is, things like this. And that's hopefully going to convey something about loneliness. So you might take a survey, and it could end up looking like this. And then I could take the survey, and it could end up looking like something like this. Now, I should note, this would be reflective of like 2 variables or something to that degree. And your mother could take it and it would look like this. And if I take it in 3 years, maybe it just only looks like this. So you get the idea. So that, these things can all be unique as, a picture of somebody's face, which I have been so accustomed to shooting. And they come in stills as well. They're video. I see the things as videos in the end, but I also wanted something for people to put on a wall. I wanted to put portraits on people's walls, and that's always been the business that I've been in and the interest that I've had. So they can be these stills from these frames that hopefully would be totally unique to the subject and would only contain what their answers could have been and would feel somehow to them like a mirror. And so I built it in a room, but then where I think the project has even longer legs is that I can, in 6 months now, if I take the cache of collections of data that I have for people answering these questions, I can take and wonder, what would you look like if you were a wrecked car? And we can have a new set of results for that. What if you were a dining room? What would that look like? It should be scalable to where you could end up as an empty apartment, or you could be a supermarket, or you could be Versailles, or anywhere in between, and it could all be a function of who you are and what your story is, what your real identity is. And so then we get back to the self-portrait again, which is really the best working model or best example of this technique. And it's got me in a scared spot where I feel like the potential is huge for this project. I think it could really be something very important, but I don't know if it'll fail. I don't know if it'll be obscure and never really actually work. And that turns out to be the sweet spot that I actually like to exist in, I guess, apparently. But if I can make this thing work and be a new way for people to understand their identity or have a picture of their identity, then I will actually feel as though I've contributed something that was new and that didn't exist before I was here. So that's what I'm after.